changing. We're flying high, creating a complaint-free world. No more, no more complaining. People, their lives are changing. We're flying high, creating a complaint-free world. No more, no more.
I am going to introduce, and I'm going to take my best shot at her last name. I think I'll do okay. Jennifer Konweiler is a best-selling author and one of the leading experts on introverts in the workplace. Now, see, this is something we've never covered before. Her pioneering books, The Introverted Leader, Quiet Influence, The Genius of Opposites, and Creating Introvert-Friendly Workplaces have been translated into 18 languages. The Introverted Leader was named one of the top 5 business books by the Shanghai Daily. That's no small feat. Congratulations for that. She's partnered with leading organizations like Amazon, Merck, Kimberly-Clark, NASA, Bosch, and U.S. Centers for Disease Control. She holds the CTA, Certified Professional Speaking designation by the National Speakers Association, and she's proud to serve as a mentor to a number of women. So I really want to get into this morning. Everybody, please welcome and tell me, how did I do with your name? Was I close?
Well, you were spot on, and I'm so relieved.
Really good. Okay.
Yeah, you can hear me okay, I think, huh?
Your volume seems a little low. I don't know if you can
let me turn it up
to your microphone, but
can you hear me better now? I unplugged my big mic, the Yeti thing, so we'll see.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and I'm using a Yeti, so.
Yeah, is it still low?
It's a little low, but it's certainly easy to hear, and we can
hear you well. I don't know, maybe, yeah.
No, we can hear you fine. It's a little low, but
okay.
Yeah, it's more than fine. I think everything is going to be great.
Let me know, let people out there let me know, and I can fiddle with it.
Sounds good. I think, and again, most of the people who will see this will see it after we record it. And so Linda says it's good here. Linda's always going to tell us. So we're good.
Linda.
All right. I want to jump in and ask you a question that I heard someone say this years ago, and I wanted to get your opinion on this. And that is that the difference between an extrovert and an introvert is that an extrovert speaks, then thinks, then speaks again. Whereas an introvert thinks, then speaks, then thinks again. Mm-hmm. And being an extreme extrovert myself, I know that is true. My mouth tends to go before my brain engages, and then I'm like, engage the brain, and then I'll talk a little bit more. Yeah. Whereas I've noticed that introverts tend to be more reflective. What do you think of that idea? Yeah. I can't remember where I got it, but thoughts.
Yeah, no. Thank you for sharing one of the definite differences. Will, it's really about energy. That's one aspect of the difference between an introvert, excuse me, sorry, and an extrovert, but it's really about where you get your energy from. And that came from Carl Jung, who's really came up with the term. And introverts get their energy. You can have talkative introverts, but they get their energy from within themselves. Okay. And now we have some evidence more and more that it's all about sort of how our brains are wired chemically. So that's interesting too, that, extroverts need more dopamine. So they're talking more to create that stimulation and being with people more. So introverts get their energy from within. Now, extroverts, on the other hand, do talk out their ideas. And hence, that's where some of the conflict happens between us. Because extroverts, as you know, if you're an extrovert, as I am actually, we get impatient sometimes, and we don't realize that the introvert needs thinking time. So, and introverts get frustrated because we don't hear from them. We're peppering questions at them all the time.
Right, exactly. Did I hear you say that you are an introvert or an extrovert?
I am an extrovert who is what I would consider, I've been working in this space and writing for 12 years. Just a little backstory. My husband is an introvert, a very strong introvert. And I married him many years ago. We're going to be in our 49th year, actually.
Wow. 49 years. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. I always say I need the congratulations. No, he says the same thing. But I literally what happened was I early on in my career when we were first married, I was so frustrated because I thought my friends were right. Maybe I shouldn't have married this guy, because we would go out with people, Will, and then he would come back and like go to the other side of our tiny apartment and not say a word for hours, And I was like, what's wrong with this guy? And it was just what you were saying. He needed the time to think and to decompress. Now, if introverts get that, then they're at their best, right? They can go back into the world and recharge. And that's where their creative ideas come. And innovation is when they are quiet. So I learned this personally. And it really did help our relationship, because I started, I did more accepting. It wasn't easy, and I still, some days are harder than others, but it really did make me realize that we were wired differently. And so when I started working in companies doing a lot of HR, leadership development, coaching, that kind of thing, I kept being drawn to supporting introverts who oftentimes I'd notice, even in a very tangible way, were passed over for opportunities or they couldn't get their ideas heard. Engineers, people in technology a lot who I was working with at the time, because they were more introverted. So I studied it. I really got deep into it and looked at ways to support them, but not help them turn into extroverts, but build on their superpowers.
Well, that's what I was going to wonder. Is the key to an extrovert being noticed and recognized and successful in the workplace to become an extrovert, or how does an introvert use their innate skills and capacities to become successful?
Well, that's an excellent question. And you probably have worked with introverts where you've seen the way their strengths, such as preparation. We found there were 6 key strengths. And actually, there are a lot more than that, but 6 key strengths. And a couple of them included the preparation that they do. Extroverts always pride themselves on winging it, right? Like, I can go into a meeting and wing it. But are they really prepared? Have they really done the legwork? The introverts go deep. Right. So they are coming, they may not say a lot, let's say in the meeting, but when they come out with the summary or the different insight, they've given it thought before even the meeting. Right. So preparation and being present. A listener is a key attribute. Being a listener is what introverts are oftentimes lauded for. People will say their best bosses were introverted leaders because of the fact that person listened first, and then, as you said, then spoke. But they took the time, just like good salespeople do, right? To not be talking, but listening to what the client needs are. So there's so many others, but those are just a few: the preparation, the listening, the observation. And so what we work on with introverted leaders is to help them amplify that. And the cool thing is you'll see in back of me now, creating introvert-friendly workplaces. When I started this work, we were really focused more on the individual and coaching them. But then we realized in working with teams, et cetera, that we needed to really get the systems to adapt, right? Because they're very extrovert, they're a type A. As you were saying, the first person who speaks, or you were alluding to, who gets ahead. It's in one survey I did early on, I think introverts, 90% of them said that extroverts get promoted more than they do. And that went on a long time.
90%?
Yeah.
That's according to introverts. That's their perspective.
Introverts, but that's very real perception. And then what happens, Will, is that they then shut down. And it affects confidence and self-esteem when you're being passed over, or you're not being really recognized for the qualities you have. And you're told all the time things like, you need to speak up in meetings more. Right. Even though they may need some time to think about it, or the person who's facilitating, as an example, they're not engaging everyone. They're hearing from, I understand, like in most meetings, 2 or 3 of the people are speaking the most. And we've all experienced that, right? That, a lot of times extroverts hate silence, so that they'll just jump in there, but it's not really well thought out. So, I love the quote by Thoreau that nature abhors a vacuum. So if we would just be quiet, put in some practices where we can be a little bit silent and then let the thoughts come out. Or another strength that introverts have is writing. So one of the practices I adapt in my meetings is, like, if we throw out a question, occasionally what we'll do is ask people to write down their response. even just take a minute to do that. And it's easy to do now, by the way, in the chat, so you'll have people on virtual meetings writing their thoughts. You've probably seen that the chats can sometimes be very active. And those are probably your introverts who are speaking there, right? And then you can bring the ideas out. And what we find is that many managers and leaders will say that they find that they get the best out of both sides of the equation, introverts and extroverts.
That's so interesting. I was thinking, I dated a woman for a year who was very much an introvert. And the first month or so, I always felt like I was pulling teeth, like trying to keep the conversation going. And over time, I began to acclimate more that that's just how she was. Do opposites attract or like attract like? That's one of the things I'm wondering. The genius of opposites. All right, tell us about this then.
So one of my books, right? And the subtitle.
Great cover, by the way. Show the cover again. Look at this. The genius of opposites. And I love the reflective.
Thank you.
Under backwards, upside down title. There we go. So tell us about this.
You're seeing it straight there. It's how introverts and extroverts achieve extraordinary, work together. 1 + 1 is, as well as, exponentially better than 2, right? You get more from opposites. But to get there, unless we're both focused on the results, it can really get ugly. Like, opposites attract, like Paula Abdul saying, right? That's true. I mean, you talked about your partner you had. I mean, it happened with me with my relationship. And we think it's kind of cute and it's fun, but then after a while, it can really be annoying, like, why aren't they talking? So, and we get frustrated. Yeah, you're nodding. So what's important is I have like 5 different steps in the book, but one of them, accept the alien. Like, if you realize you are not going to change the other person, that's very hard. That's a very hard insight to really adapt. But once you do that, then you're in for a lot less stress and frustration. But there are a couple of other things to just realize about our wiring. Like, the fact that you said introverts like to be alone. So let them be alone, and let introverts also give. And you'll notice they'll do that when they're successful. They'll say, okay, I know you need to talk this out. Let's make a time to do that today. So extroverts will say, I need to download my ideas. But, the introvert doesn't want you coming in all the time to interrupt them. So you find, ways to make it work. So I think those are some of the ways. And, being private, like a lot of introverts will tell you, they don't want to like open up their fur coat and let you see everything. It's always been, the metaphor was the extrovert keeps the fur on the outside, the introvert inside. So you have to let them get to trust you and know you. They feel it's intrusive. Extroverts feel, this is how I connect with you. I had one woman I interviewed she had a very close coworker, and the woman didn't say a word about her daughter getting married. And the extrovert was kind of hurt. She's like, I wanted to be part of it. I wanted to throw her a shower. The person didn't want that. The woman who's the mother of the bride, she wanted to come in afterwards. So we have to accept our differences there and not hold it. That's kind of a silly example, but it can, those kind of things can really affect our work together.
If you get 2 introverts, here's my extreme thinking. You get 2 introverts together, nothing gets discussed. You get 2 extroverts together, they basically burn each other out. Is that an accurate assessment, or do sometimes, because I'm dating someone now who's very extroverted and I like it. There's a lot of conversation. Do you comment on that, please?
Well, yeah. So do you have too much of it? Yeah, you can. But here's the difference. If you're aware, it's like, I really consider this like an aspect of diversity, inclusion, and equity. It's one pair of glasses that we look through. And if you have 2 strong extroverts together, if they recognize that they're both talking over each other, or they're in their enthusiasm, which, by the way, extroverts have a lot of, and people really appreciate that, you can get too enthusiastic, right? So then you're not listening to each other. So the point is, we each have, every one of us, it's a spectrum, Will. So we all have the introvert side and the extrovert side. So, I think that we've learned over the last few years that extroverts many of them have told me in surveys I'm doing and interviews that they have really appreciated. They didn't think they would, but being a little more quiet, taking some time to take a walk, to they didn't have a choice. They were in lockdown, you know, they couldn't go out and schmooze and visit with their friends. So in fact, they got kind of depressed about that, but then they realized, okay, let me explore. It happened for me. I started exploring poetry. Like I never wrote a poem in my life. And I went on randomly on one of these virtual things because I was kind of bored that day. And I just started writing a poem with this teacher. And then you haven't been able to stop me. I'm taking all these classes. Now, would this extrovert have discovered poetry? Most likely not. Most likely. So
one of the things,
if you found that you were able to slow down a little bit.
I get it. Sorry to interrupt. We're two extroverts here trying to have a conversation. So from what I understand, extroverts run into the challenge of not listening to one another because they're both talking. And introverts run into a risk of not really fully communicating. Is that somewhat accurate?
It could. Right. Again, if they're not aware, you know, if they're unconscious, it's called unconscious bias, really, that we've talked about in diversity, inclusion, and equity, right? And you know, it's not just about getting along and like, it's really about results. Well, you know, like, and I think about recruiting and hiring, the process. I've worked with managers on this where, you know, I'll use the example you said, introvert to introvert. There's this bias. Well, that person's like me, you know, they're kind of quiet and they're not, you know, they're not offering a lot in the interview, but, you know, I still want to hire them, which is fine. But we have to also look at the composite of the team and what the job requires. You know, if that person is an out-facing kind of person where they're doing outside sales, and they can do it in the introvert way, by the way, but you're doing it just because they match your personality, or you know, if you're not aware of that, it might even be just subconscious, like, oh, that this feels right. On the other hand, we've had really nutty examples when I was doing research on the last book of where a team would say, well, I don't think we want to have a beer. This is not the kind of person we want to go out with, you know, have a beer with. And they were passed over. And then they were able to get another opportunity, as these were sometimes internal promotions, and became like the C-level leader of the company, you know? So we have to, if we're aware that that's just one piece of it, the personality, and maybe it didn't matter so much in that job that they be a person that wants to go out at night, you know? So it's awareness of these things.
I once heard, I went to a seminar for speakers, Brendan Burchard put it on. And one of the things that he said was that most professional speakers are introverts. And I don't know if he was just trying to be engaging or if that's an accurate statement. Do you have any thoughts on that?
You know, we probably should do a survey. You and I are both members of the National Speaker Association. I would say anecdotally, I would say that's true. I would agree with Brendan on that. And the reason I say that is it aligns with most actors, actresses, or I guess we call everybody actors now, comedians are introverts. Have you ever gone to a comedy show and the person's like really out there, and then you want to just thank them or say something nice to them at the end, and they barely want to even look up at you and make eye contact, right? This is more the norm. So what that seems to be about, from what I talk with my introverted clients about, is it's when when they know they're in a role, you know, that they're going to be performing like a speaker does, like we do. We nail our keynote, right? We practice it. We know what the lines are going to be. Then when we can get up there, we can be all out there. We can act like an extrovert, right? We can, and that helps us. You know, we're funny, we're engaging, but then boy, you see a lot of our speaker friends, they are just spent. And to a certain extent, I feel that as an extrovert. You speak a lot, Will. Don't you feel you give everything and you sort of have to recharge?
Oh, absolutely. And I was just thinking about that. As soon as I get off stage, I'm an introvert. You know, I've given so much energy. I've sweated through my clothes just because I'm so passionate, you know, and everything. And then I just want to be like chilled and quiet.
I've seen your videos, and I can see that for sure. And if we're not, then we're not at our best. You know, think of all the virtuosos. They stop and they recharge, and they think, and they even reflect on what went well, what would I do differently next time? If you keep running, you don't have a chance to do that. And that really connects to the workplace, doesn't it? you know?
Absolutely. My guest is Jennifer Konweiler, and she has, if you don't know whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, she has a quiz. And I've put it there in the comment section. So go in and take a look. And I see several of you have questions and comments. Ed wanted to know, let me jump in here with our friend Ed. What are your thoughts on ambiverts? I've never heard that, but I would leave it totally. This is an Ed question. He always has such interesting things to ask. I am naturally an introvert, but when I am in the right environment, my extrovert qualities jump out. Do people float back and forth like that? And if so, what causes that?
Yeah, I love that question, Ed. Yeah, a lot of people, there is a term, well, ambivert. There's the research is kind of, there's not that much on it. Let's put it that way. However, what I say to people is you have two things. What works for you, Ed? And it sounds like you're aware of that you're naturally that way, but that you are conscious when you're in those environments where you need to be social, let's say. You can do that. But then if you know yourself, you need to build in breaks, like a conference, for instance, right? You kind of plan the schedule. That's what a lot of introverts say. Okay, well, when can I escape, right, and not be in the hallway? But it's about that. It's about what behaviors you identify with, and number two, what term do you identify with? If an ambivert feels right to you, say it. And the other thing is to let other people know in your family, in your with your friends, and at work specifically. When we start, I talked earlier about changing the system. When we start making this okay, which by the way, over the last 12 years in my research, I'm seeing more and more leaders talk openly about it being introverted, and famous people like Oprah and, all these people that I've mentioned in my lists and my writing. So once we, say it's okay in our society and our culture, and not a pejorative term, which it still tends to be sometimes, I'm not going to lie. That perception will change. But great question, Ed.
It's so interesting that we consider introversion a pejorative, but extroversion a strength. Whereas what occurred to me as you were talking, you're right. In all of my business throughout the years, I was in radio for many years. You'd have meetings, and I was one of the 2 or 3 people that was constantly running my mouth, but it didn't mean that we were the smartest ones in the room. So oftentimes you're losing out on the people with a lot to contribute, because they, as you said, have spent some time actually giving it some thought and aren't just shooting from the hip. How do we as extroverts encourage introverts and truly give them the attention and the listen they deserve?
It's not complicated. What I had to learn was just to be quiet, and be okay with the silence, because as I said earlier, people will fill that silence if you give them the space. It's our anxiety that comes in, our excitement, our enthusiasm. If we could just dampen that down a little bit, Will, and then I think that's really the major thing that we can do. And what people tell me makes the biggest difference. I even have people say to extroverts I've known in meetings, say, I use a 1, 2, 3. I like go count slowly. I make a number that I'm going to, before I speak again, or I count how many times I contribute. So I keep bringing up meetings because this is a real pain point for introverts. Meetings and networking is another area that they have a lot of trouble with.
Oh, I can imagine.
Right?
Yeah. I was thinking about the great Brian Tracy talks about the key, and this was so helpful to me as an extrovert, is 2 things. Number 1, he says, always think of like a spotlight. And if you're talking, it's on you. If they're talking, it's on them. Try and do your best to have it on them as much as possible. Let them talk. And then he said, just as you said, take a breath before you respond.
And absolutely. And I love Ryan's work. And one skill we learn a lot, Will, that we forget about. Introverts are very grateful when I remind them, all of us really, extroverts too. This is for the introverts, paraphrasing. We always say, well, that's an active listening. You'll say back what you hear, right? But I think it helps both of us to kind of like just stay focused on what the introvert is saying instead of coming back with the next thing that we want to say and not being present, because being present is another strength of introverts, by the way.
Which is often lacking in some of us extroverts. I know that I struggle so often with interrupting. And I saw a thing that somebody posted on Facebook, and it said, I'm I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have something really important to say and I'm excited.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, I
Well,
was like, oh my gosh, that just totally nailed me.
really hit
That
home.
is
Listen,
exactly.
we have
Would
to
you,
laugh. We have to laugh at each other and not laugh with each other, and and not make this too serious. I love somebody wrote here, Willow, grateful for a wonderful Mother's Day with my introvert and extroverted daughters. I love that. That's showing you're accepting both of them, and we can laugh about it. But we had a T-shirt contest, and based on your interruption thing, I had to share. I hate it when people talk while I'm interrupting.
love that. I love
And
that.
and guess who came up with that? The extroverts. I
The
love it.
extra, an extrovert came out. Well, that makes perfect
Extroverts
sense.
came up with
Yes,
that, and then
absolutely.
the other one was you read my. This is for the introvert. You read my T-shirt. That's enough social interaction. We give those as prizes.
Those are prizes. I was hoping they were
Yeah,
available on a website or
I'll
something.
send you. Well, no, I don't want to sell them, but if anybody wants to send me a note, I'll be happy to consider selling.
That's
I'll
awesome.
send you one, no problem. I'll send you one, Will, for having me on today. What a great discussion with you.
Very sweet of you. Thank you very much. Well, speaking of which, I want to remind everybody that this is your opportunity to share this positive message with others. Click like, comment, and share. That is how we build this online positive community and have so for many years. I think we're approaching 900 episodes now.
Yeah, no, I love quoting all these folks. I think in terms of parting thoughts, I think we are the messengers of this, and I think we should, but if we're aware of these two dimensions within each of us, as I said, it's a personal growth opportunity for each of us, but in our workplaces and in our families, bringing this topic up, getting people to take a look at whether they may be more introvert extroverts. There's plenty of quizzes. You can take mine. There's plenty online. And having some fruitful discussions about when it's working for us in our relationships and when it isn't, when it's working for us on our teams and when it isn't. What could we do differently? How could we create an environment in when we're working together, and make it okay to talk about? So, song of the day from the extroverts.
Oh, yeah, I was going to tell you, we always, and I love that Linda brought this home. We always do a song of the day. And we ask people to everybody listen to the song of the day when we're done. And she's asking what's a good song of the day for extroverts and the introverts. And I had a couple of thoughts. Can I tell you?
Yeah, please.
Extroverts, Shout It Out Loud by Kiss. Introverts, Alone in My Own Little Corner. Those are the first two songs from Snow White. Do you have any thoughts on that song?
Well, I have to go back to Paul Abdul with Genius Opposites. That's basically mine. Yeah.
Opposites attract.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Attract, right. Sorry. It's Monday morning. I'm sorry. That's my.
Oh, I get it. Hold up your book again, please.
I've got 4 of them. So
4 of them. Okay.
Leader. This is the classic. This is the one that looks at building on your quiet strength for anybody who leads in any sort of way, right? Mm-hmm. And looks at the 4 Ps, which I have a model in each book for how introverts can build on their strengths. And then we have quiet influence, which is if you want to make a difference across your organization or in any particular way. This highlights the 6 key strengths that introverts use to do that. And then, of course, we've talked about Genius Op. I hope this isn't too much.
No. Because each one is aimed towards a specific audience, I feel. So no, I think it's great. Everybody. Or as
the evolution of introversion, develops, we are now, as I talked about, these are the pairs, these are the partnerships, these are the teams. And then finally, the exciting one that you can see all my sticky notes on the last program I did, creating introvert-friendly workplaces. So what can we do, particularly now as a lot of us are moving back into hybrid situations. So, how do we learn from what we experienced in the pandemic to really, get rid of those, apartment type cubicles, give people spaces, and make it an environment where people want to come in occasionally to work, right? Or every day.
Well, and I could talk to you all day. I don't want to keep you though. I guess I would like to close by asking you, what was the impact of COVID on introverts versus extroverts?
Introverts loved 2 sides. Introverts loved the opportunity to have remote work, like by far, like high percentages in every survey we did, every discussion, like 85, 90% loved love the opportunity to manage their time, the way they communicated. On the downside, Zoom fatigue took over, and loneliness as the pandemic wore on. And I think you could say some of the same was true for extroverts.
I know for me, it was, it's a struggle to just not be around and be with people. That's one of the reasons that I, as a writer and a speaker, I'll often go out to work, to the library, to
Yep.
Starbucks, just to
Yep.
have folks around me. Well, I always like to ask Jennifer, where's your next speech? Do you have someplace you're going to be seeing?
Well, let's see. I'm looking at my whiteboard now, where I have my next one we're working on. Oh, in Atlanta, I'll be working with a company here I'm very excited about. Yeah. And I actually just kind of shifted my keynote. So that's been fun to be able to work on deliver. I delivered the first one last week at a privately held company, and it went really well. We had more extroverts attend, Will, and that's what I'm going for now. Is we're going to talk to both.
Yeah, because it really doesn't do a lot you've got to have the compassion from the extroverts, and you've also got to have the tools for the introverts.
Yeah, so we're going to put that up on the website, that new keynote. But I'd love to, if everybody wants to ask me any questions, I'm available. I do a lot on LinkedIn too. And yeah, we have 4 quizzes actually on the site. They're all free, and feel free to share. It's
awesome.
Really been an honor to be on your show.
Thank you. Well, I often have former speaking clients who watch this, and I have to tell you, you need to check out Jennifer, because this is something I know that I would definitely like to see in a keynote. I will be at Northeast Iowa Community College on the 18th. I was looking to see when my next gig was.
Say it again, the name of the
Northeast Iowa Community College. They're doing a big business expo.
Nice.
And I'm the morning keynote there. So how about you going to Influence this year?
I'm pretty much, I've got a gig then. So I'm going to make it for at least some of it. It's near my hometown in Atlanta. Atlanta's not far. And you're in Florida, right?
Key Largo. Yeah. Right now I'm in St. Pete, but normally.
How about you? Are you going?
Oh, yes, I am. This will be my first time in a few years, and I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, yeah. It should be great. Should be great.
Well, I'm going to walk around and see if I can figure out who's an introvert. I'll go up to Les Brown and Brian Tracy, some of the big ones.
Yeah, let's do a survey. That'd be fun.
Yes.
You and I should write something on that.
We should introduce that. Yeah. I really feel we should. I think it's
I do want to put a plug in for the really great podcast that NSA is doing with Tom Singer called Speakernomics. And I did an interview with him recently on this topic on speakers and introversion. So you may want to, it's a few episodes ago.
Speakernomics.
I recommend that to your listeners, because it's a very well done podcast. And he has all of our colleagues on there. You should contact him and get on there, Will.
Sounds fun.
Yeah.
Well, Jennifer, thank you again for being here with us.
Been a pleasure, and thank you for
everybody. Check this out. This is a fascinating subject, and when I was reading her bio and everything, I was like, I want to learn more. So thanks everybody for being here. Thank you, Jennifer. What's your website, please?
Oh, it's www.Jennifer Kahnweiler. My spelling there. KAHN JENNIFER Kahnweiler KAHNWEILER.com.
Check it out. Thanks everybody. Enjoy today. Make it a great Monday.
Thank you, Will.
Complaint-free world, no more complaining people. Their lives are changing. We're flying high, creating a complaint-free